E3 might still have a ways to go before it's finished, but the major press conferences are all over. Those are going to be a pretty basic overview of E3, so we've kind of seen most of what we're going to see. So without further ado, here are the 15 games that caught my interest the most out of these press conferences. The Division 1 was the first game I actually reviewed on my channel, and it was a flawed game, very much so. However, I did find the concept enjoyable and the overall gameplay was pretty on point. However, number 2, the problems that game did have are more of a big picture thing, like mission structure, progression, customization, and things like that. Stuff that's deeper than surface level. Sure, the demos of the Division 2 looked good on the surface, but so did the demos for the Division 1. They were keen to point out some improved progression and build variety and more interesting weapon variety, but there was so much more wrong with the Division than that, and the E3 showcase for the Division 2 didn't really do much to quell the fears that those mistakes would be repeated, but neither was it confirmed that they will be repeating those mistakes, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I really enjoyed playing Gears 1 through 3, but my interest in the franchise sort of started to teeter off around then. Each game just started to feel like more of the same and I kinda got bored of it. And then Microsoft comes along with this stellar conference overall and Gears of War 5 as part of it. Ever since the franchise fatigue set in, I never really thought I'd get another Gears game at all. But everything they showed of Gears of War 5 just looked really fucking good. A convenient parallel I drew is with the God of War series, where I never really liked the original games. But then we come along to a new installment in the modern day and it just looks so much better than the older games. And if I know Gears of War, I know that it's gonna have co-op as well, which is a huge plus for me. So for better or worse, I think I'm sold on this game at the moment. Worst case scenario, it ends up being not as good as the trailer made it seem, and I can give it appropriate shit during my review. But at the moment, my hopes are pretty high for this game. I've personally never played a Metro game, but I've heard a lot of praise for some of the previous titles. Sure, it's possible I might enjoy them if I go back and play them, but I didn't really like how much of the game seemed to take place in, well, a Metro. I'm sure the world from the books it's based off of is really interesting, but I just never got into the original games for that reason. Now, however, it's even less of a priority than it was before as we see Metro Exodus revealed at E3, seeming to take place a lot more above ground than the previous games, allowing players to more deeply explore this fascinating post-apocalyptic Russian setting has certainly piqued my interest. However, there is this little nagging fear that I might have had to have played the previous games to understand the story of Metro Exodus. That, combined with me being kinda clueless as to what the gameplay actually entails other than being a shooter, is kinda serving to temper my hype, but it is exciting to possibly have my first dive into an interesting franchise that I've never experienced before. And everything we saw at E3, from the weapon customization to the hazardous environments filled with creepy ghoulies in post-apocalyptic Russia, well, for the first time it seems the Metro franchise has finally caught my interest. Now, the first few Resident Evil games have gotten a lot of praise, but I was never really able to get into it myself. I found its unique brand of gameplay with the weird-ass camera angles just grossly unappealing. But I am a fan of the Resident Evil franchise, so I've always wanted a way to experience those older games in a way that didn't involve such weird fucking gameplay. But then during the Sony conference, we had this game that looked like a rat simulator or something, and I was just thinking, like, what the fuck am I watching? Then suddenly our main character died. A frickin' zombie shows up out of nowhere, and then fucking Leon shows up and shoots him in the face. Now I'm like, oh shit, it's old Resident Evil with Leon in his Raccoon City outfit. And then I got excited. Now, the trailer they showed didn't actually have any gameplay, at least as far as we can tell. So it's possible we might get something more faithful to the original gameplay, and that would turn me off. But the amount of up-close shots of the environment and the characters, as well as one very specific and brief part of the trailer that seemed to show a Resident Evil 4 style camera angle but without the HUD, leads me to believe that we're at least not getting that. Now whether it's the third-person gameplay style of 4 or the new first-person game style of 7, I don't care. As long as it's not the old gameplay style, I'm fucking hyped for this. We'll have to wait and see what other details they decide to reveal, but I'm just excited that I'm gonna have a way to experience one of the old classic Resident Evil games. So I'm excited to see any details they decide to show in the future. What the fuck even is this game, Kojima? Death Stranding has been this massive enigma of video games ever since it was announced. Nobody really even seems to know what the fuck it is. Not even the dev team itself. But as it's Hideo Kojima's first game separated from Konami, everyone seems to be absolutely fascinated figuring out just what the fuck it is. And I'm certainly no exception to this. And what's especially confusing is that for the first time, gameplay has actually been shown of this game at E3. And after seeing the gameplay, I have just as many questions about the game as before. I have absolutely no clue what the fuck is going on, but I really want to know more. And after this E3 demo, I've sort of come to the conclusion that maybe that's the gameplay. Only Kojima really seems to know what this game is, and figuring out what that is, that's probably the point of the game. And that sounds like something truly unique that we've never seen before. And for me, one of the big draws of gaming is exploring these new worlds and universes that you'll never get to see in real life. So that concept combined with one of the biggest names in video game storytelling really has me interested. And apart from that, we have some creepy and fascinating stealth gameplay in the mix as well. And by the way, I really hope you're not playing a drinking game where every time I say the word fascinating you take a shot, cause you will die. But for now, I don't really think there's much I can talk about with this game because I don't really know what the fuck is going on. But I'm sure I'm not the only one, and I'm sure also that everyone agrees it's in a good way. So I'm gonna be keeping my eye on this game for the days to come. This game had one of the most brilliant reveals I've ever seen at the end of the Microsoft conference. That fucking baiting and telling us, oh, conference is over, and then fucking everything glitching out and the Cyberpunk 2077 trailer starts. It was just such a clever way to show off a game at E3, especially one as highly anticipated as this. And then we finally got to have a glimpse of the game itself, or at least the game engine and the world, and it just looks so interesting, and I'm not going to use the FA word to save you the shots. And while I never got to play The Witcher 3 or any of the Witcher games for that matter, I respect the fuck out of this developer for their gamer-friendly policies, and that I know if they're making a game that it's not going to be marred with corporate fuckery, and that they're just going to focus on making a good game for everyone to enjoy. And with as cool as this world looks, I can't help but get excited just because it's CD Projekt Red. I certainly wish the trailer would have shown a bit of actual gameplay, but since this is coming from a developer with a reputation like CDPR's, I feel like I can safely place my faith in them to make the game good. I am looking forward to the future though when we do see some actual gameplay of this. Dying Light 1 to me was kind of an underdog hit. Sure, it had its fair share of flaws, but I found the cooperative parkour zombie survival experience to be a blast. And Dying Light 2 appears to be shaping up to be everything I would hope for in a sequel to that game. With a more interesting sounding story and unique factions with flaws and benefits, and an evolving story that changes every player's experience with the game, improved gameplay and a setting that lends itself better to the parkour zombies experience. I love Dying Light 1 and Dying Light 2 looks like it's going to be even better than the original. Now, I used to believe that video games were different than movies and that the sequel was almost always inherently better than the original. More and more lately, however, this has proven to not be the case. Battlefront. Dying Light, however, seems to be following this idea, harkening back to the good old days when a video game sequel was always better than the original. Ever since Assassin's Creed took to the Seven Seas and Black Flag, people have been starving for a good dedicated pirate game. As I watch and laugh as Sea of Thieves flops on its face, I turn my attention to Ubisoft's upcoming Skull and Bones. Where Black Flag was severely held back by being an Assassin's Creed game, Skull and Bones aims to take that ship sailing formula from Black Flag and build a dedicated pirate game around it. At E3 this year, they showed a brief demo of the actual main game rather than just the side competitive modes they did last time, and it showed off some fantastic customization and gameplay, as well as actual co-op with other captains. And this did a much better job of getting me excited than the last demo they showed of the competitive mode. However, one of my fears that the first demo brought up is not really alleviated by this demo. They showed a quick boarding action and it didn't have that big event that it did in Black Flag where you actually board their ship yourself and fight on their ship for greater rewards. So my big concern is, will there be any kind of ground gameplay like exploring islands for treasure? And even maybe hell, just have that little cutscene be a multiplayer only thing, and allow you to still do the badass boarding action sequences a la Black Flag in the single player and co-op. That would greatly put my mind at ease. Cause as Sea of Thieves showed us, it can be pretty easy to fuck this up. But in this case, between Assassin's Creed Black Flag and Rogue, they have 2 games worth of feedback on this style of game. Surely they wouldn't just make the mistake of making a world completely devoid of content, right? Right? Now, EA's been getting a lot of well-deserved flack lately for their treatment of gamers with microtransactions, and their wet dump of a conference didn't really do them any favors. However, there were 1 or 2 gems hidden in the piles of shit, and one of those was Battlefield 5. While they didn't actually show any gameplay demos or anything like that during the conference itself, the game was playable at their event, so a lot of people managed to get footage of the actual gameplay. A lot of the cool shit they've talked about during the previous conferences all seems to be there, which I guess isn't really surprising, but it was good to see the promises they've made manifest in actual gameplay. So the game itself is actually turning out to look really good. The only fear in my mind, as is a fear with everyone I'm sure, is monetization. Now, they've promised that there will be no pay to win and no loot boxes, and that everything will be cosmetic and what you see is what you get, but it's been hard to take EA at their word lately after Battlefront 2. And they've been awfully tight-lipped about the details of monetization. And that scares me. And that scares a lot of people. But whatever fuckery EA decides to pull, I see underneath that from DICE a game with passion put into it. Excluding, of course, the Battle Royale mode that they have announced, which is disappointing but entirely unsurprising. It's not my jam, but I'm sure plenty of people will be into it. Hell, most of my friends are still really into PUBG, so I guess I'll probably end up playing the BR mode anyways. Silver linings though, if there's any gameplay formula that'll lend itself well to a BR mode, it's the squad-based gameplay of Battlefield. But they aren't sacrificing any modes to add BR like Call of Duty is. In fact, they're also adding a co-op mode to the game, which fuck me if I ain't all about that co-op. So you can count me on board for Battlefield 5, but I'm gonna be real pissed off if the monetization sucks. The previous iteration in the Assassin's Creed franchise opted to take the game in a new direction, focusing less on a linear story in the open world, which was always a weird fit, and more on just providing an open-ended adventure where you go out and explore the world and find new things, with many smaller, more self-contained stories on top of the main story, which is less significant now. While I never actually played the previous game since I was just sort of turned off by the setting and aesthetics, I've always supported the change in direction for the story and the gameplay, which seems to have more weight and difficulty to it, such as the deeper RPG elements in the conversations and equipment options available to you. And unlike the previous ancient Egyptian setting of the last game, this ancient Greek setting seems a lot more interesting to me. While I heard that the last game had some problems with the acting and the story, that's the kind of problem that there's nothing really stopping them from doing different this time around. And even if they don't, I'm super excited to dive into this gameplay change that more closely embodies why I play games. And hell, I'm kind of excited that Assassin's Creed's no longer following that linear modern day story that's starting to feel kinda tired and worn out. Instead, focusing a lot more heavily on the historical, or maybe a little less than historical settings. Which I definitely don't think is a bad thing, because sometimes too much realism makes the game boring. And hell, I am excited for the more historical elements, but I'm also excited to slay some ancient Greek mythological monsters. The second gem to be pulled out of EA's shitstorm of a conference is Anthem. Now the biggest fear with this game is of course EA, but BioWare isn't immune to the same concerns, especially after the disappointing launch of Mass Effect Andromeda. Now the story goes apparently that Andromeda failed so hard was because resources and personnel were drawn from Andromeda to work on Anthem instead, and that the Mass Effect franchise was sacrificed to make Anthem better. Now because BioWare is a company that has such a good background and reputation, with the exception of Mass Effect Andromeda of course, I'm willing to be like, okay, we'll see if it worked and we'll see if Anthem is good. And all the gameplay they've shown of Anthem looks absolutely phenomenal. But at the moment it's suffering the same problems as Battlefield right now. What aren't they showing us? What's the catch? Because this is EA and EA is notorious for fucking games up. So what does EA plan to do to fuck up Anthem? Now like with Battlefield, they've promised no loot boxes, no pay to win, cosmetic only microtransactions, what you see is what you get, yada yada yada. And I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds perfect. That sounds too good. This is EA. What are you planning? What's your top secret evil plan? Where have you hidden the bomb? You know what I mean? So as a reviewer, I'm gonna be your EOD tech and dive into this game and find if there's a bomb. If we're clean, this could be one of the best games ever. If we're not, boom. I am so incredibly hyped for Starfield. There's one thing that Bethesda is known for doing incredibly well, and that is open world RPGs with high amounts of freedom, where there is literally so much to explore, very few people will ever get to see the entire game. And according to all the leaks, Starfield seems to be that, but set in space, which is a setting that's perfect for that type of gameplay formula. But there is one big reason this isn't higher on the list. Everything we know about the game is from these leaks. The only thing we got at E3 for Starfield was this 30-second teaser trailer, which I'm looping here because there's literally no other footage for me to show. And all it shows us is that yes, it is in fact called Starfield, and yes, it is in fact in space, which was already leaked and more, but you can never really take leaks 100% at their word. So it is somewhat satisfying to see these leaks confirmed, which is a lot more than you can say about the 20-second teaser for Elder Scrolls 6 we also got at E3, which only confirms one thing that everyone already knew. It exists. Guys, it exists. Get your fucking hype trains rolling. Please, for the love of God, don't get your hype trains rolling. Shadows Die Twice, and yes, I know it has an actual name now, but you're not going to hear me call that because I'm terrible at speaking Japanese, is From Software's next adventure RPG-ish game. In short, it's the next From Souls, so I am automatically on board no matter what, as From Software and its director Hidetaka Miyazaki have earned my undying loyalty with games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne. The formula of the quote-unquote From Souls RPG has become my favorite in all of gaming. However, I would be lying outright if I said the new setting didn't disappoint me. As you could have probably guessed from my refusal to even attempt to pronounce the game's main name, I am not the biggest fan of Japanese aesthetics with samurais and ninjas and whatnot, but I'm willing to look past the aesthetic and the setting of Shadows Die Twice because it's From Software. What is worrying me aside from the setting though is that some people are getting behind closed doors demos of the game, and they're reporting that character creation, currency, leveling, weapon and armor variations, and multiplayer are all gone. Essentially, it's not an RPG anymore. But as much as I love RPGs, it's not like they're the only type of game that can be good. So since it's From Software, I'm willing to let them take away some of my favorite toys to see what they offer in exchange. The last wild card with this game, of course, is that Activision is involved. But if I know Miyazaki, I know that he wouldn't let a publisher compromise his vision for money. So I'm gonna have faith in the great Lord Miyazaki, praise be to he, deliver unto me your gift of video games. With every single Elder Scrolls and Fallout game, I feel like the biggest thing missing is co-op. Nothing super fancy, just the ability to invite a friend to explore with you. And that's what Fallout 76 seems to offer. Seems to, at least. Thing is, they only said it was multiplayer, and they showed off both PvP and PvE in the open world, so I'm not really sure yet what Fallout 76 is actually supposed to be. My assumption from the information we did get is that it might be some kind of Rust type multiplayer situation, where you play in these open multiplayer servers where everyone kind of does their own thing, where you can team up with other players, but they could also try and fuck you as well. And that doesn't sound great for me for obvious reasons. I don't like PvP, and it could also hamper mod support. But this kind of thing has been worked around before, as you can see with Conan Exiles in my review of that, where they allowed people to set up PvE only servers or single player co-op modes where you just invite your friends. And in order for everyone to connect to each other, you had to have the same list of mods installed. Now, if Fallout 76 does all that same stuff, then fuck yeah, I'm on board. Otherwise, the nukes in a multiplayer PvP game of this style is gonna break the game entirely. Bad enough in something like Rust, where someone can come along and fuck up everything you've worked hard on, and now give people the ability to do it from the safety of a nuclear silo in an instant. I'll give that a hard pass, but if they allow me the option to keep this PvE only, then it could be an interesting gameplay mechanic. But nuclear escalation in a PvP environment sounds completely broken to me. But as long as I have that PvE option, this sounds like a dream come true. Cooperative Fallout experience. Count me in. Halo is a beloved franchise, very, very close to my heart. And while it certainly wasn't the first game I had ever played, it was the first game I became obsessed with. Lately, however, it has not been the amazing franchise that it used to be. Ever since 343 Industries took the reins, Halo has never been quite the same. It's never quite felt like Halo. But the universe and characters are still so close to my heart that no matter how many missteps the franchise makes, I will always be watching and waiting for my next opportunity to dive back into the game. 343's made a lot of changes and design decisions with Halo 4 and 5 that a lot of fans, including myself, were really displeased with. From the changes to the art style and the soundtrack, to the tone of the story and gameplay, new characters have been introduced and fan favorites have been pushed to the wayside, but the community has been very vocal about their concerns. And 343 has been left with two options. Either they continue down the path that they've set, or they listen to every ounce of feedback and give fans the Halo game they've been asking for. And the in-engine demonstration they showed at E3 for Halo Infinite showed that thankfully they had chose the second choice. Not only did the game engine look truly remarkable, but they showed hints that Halo was returning to its roots. What they showed looked like Halo, old school Bungie style Halo. After Halo Wars 2 showed a similar pattern of somewhat returning to a classic Halo style, it would seem that they've finally decided to take the leap back into the classic Halo style. And when the music kicked in, it just about brought a tear to my eye. I bet you thought we were finished. Nope, not quite yet. This was a very weird E3, so I've got a bonus ranking for you guys. I'm gonna rank the parts of E3 that were so bad they were funny. Here are my top 5 memes of E3. What the fuck was Sony thinking deciding to book one specific game's worth of a conference in a church? And it was only relevant in one specific cutscene of the game they showed there because it took place in a church. Meanwhile, the other 80% of that demo took place in an abandoned city. Sony, was it really worth moving an entire conference of decorations to a church, only to move the entire setup and audience to an actual stage afterward, requiring you to do an incredibly awkward mid-show intermission type thing, while your entire audience and setup was moving to the actual location of your conference? I'm sorry, I need to use the bathroom. First, we had esports. Now, we have mobile esports. A market dominated by, and by that I mean solely populated with, Command and Conquer tactics. Guys, you're gonna have to enlighten me here. Is mobile esports really a fucking thing? Who is EA trying to please with this? I would really like to know so that I can punch them in the mouth. Thankfully, I'm not a Command and Conquer fan, or else I'd be very pissed off about this. What I will say though, to all you Command and Conquer fans out there, my deepest condolences. Bethesda pulled an admittedly pretty funny skit about Skyrim being ported to Amazon Alexa. It wasn't really what I came to E3 to watch, but I did think the skit was funny.
How many wheels of cheese do I have left?
473.
Okay, I eat all the cheese. I eat all of the cheese.
But then the joke soured on me as soon as they announced Elder Scrolls on mobile devices. Well, I gotta hand them one thing, they're really embracing the memes. Man, E3 can be awkward sometimes, but goddamn, Bethesda was so awkward during their conference. Whenever there was something weird happening on stage, they'd show shots of people who were into it, but behind them you'd see 5 people making faces like, what the fuck am I watching? And let's not forget how awkward some of the presenters were, with long pauses and awkward chuckles at the end of their sentences. It sounds like a lot of NPCs in Dark Souls when you refuse to skip the dialogue.
There are actually 2 bells of awakening.
E3, as we all know, it's all about the games. This year, however, so many publishers decided they wanted to spend E3 showing musical performances. When Bethesda started their conference with a performance from the people who did the soundtrack of Rage 2, I think, I was thinking, okay, this is fucking weird. I really hope Bethesda's just being unique. And it really made me cringe because I was watching to see games, not a concert. But, of course, guess what happened in the next conference? I shit you not. This is actual footage from the Ubisoft conference. Some guy in a panda suit dancing to a marching band and this dude trying to be Epic Sax Guy. It's something I just wouldn't have believed they actually did at E3 if I hadn't seen it myself. And while Ubisoft definitely took the cringe award for weird fucking musical performance at E3, Sony was not content to sit out this party. And I'm sorry if this is disrespectful to any of the artists who performed at E3, but I watched these conferences to see games, not some dude blowing into a wooden tube. Next thing you know, E3 2019 is going to be E3 on ice. But anyways, now we've reached the end of the video. Feel free to like or dislike the video, subscribe if you want to see more videos, and if you're on Twitch, you can follow me and you'll see whenever I go live or upload a new video, and goodbye.